Yeah, yeah, yeah. That Crew Podcast Network presents Science Speak. Speaks with Queen Mother Dr. Chen. Live every first and third Thursday at 8 p.m. AST. Culture, healing, heritage, spirituality, Caribbean roots, and African diaspora rising. From St. Croix shores to the world so wide. Queen Mother Dr. Chen brings truth with pride. Culture in the rhythm, wisdom in the sound. Healing for the people, roots in sacred ground. She keeps the story, she keeps it alive. African diaspora, we rise and thrive. Caribbean voices, bold and free. Honoring ancestors, shaping destiny. As we speak, so let the people know. Culture and healing in a reggae flow. As this speaks, heritage strong. Spiritual wisdom all night long. It's strong. Every first and third Thursday, tune in live. 8 p.m. EST, come feel the vibe. As this speaks, we rise, we seek. Queen Mother Dr. Chen, I speak. This kick standing, preserving the flame. Teaching our people to honor the name. Perank moving with chats for life. Culture, healing, art, spirit, and life. Thick Maraji community, wisdom too. Building up the people in all we do. From island roots to global lands, we remember, rise and stand. Pan-African vision, reparations call. Justice and healing for one and all. Audible, these are I heart, hurry too. Amazon music bringing vibes to you. As this speaks, let the people know. Culture and healing in a reggae flow. As this speaks.
And greetings. Hotep, welcome yet again. We're going to have a wonderful broadcast tonight because we have a guest that's going to give us some powerful energy, wonderful thought engagement that is actionable, right? Things that we can do right now. So, welcome yet again to another live broadcast of Speaks Building a New Legacy. This is your host, Queen Mother, Dr. ChenziRa. I am really excited to be able to start as we customarily do Amasu and Panter sa Uksu Emitran Panter Auda Maketi Pahura. And all I'm saying, for those in the back of the class, as well as in the front of the class, in the meta nature, and the way that we're able to pronounce it through this lingua that we're graced with now, is we give thanks and praise to the one most high. We live each day daily for the one most divine. And we shall do it tomorrow just as we do it today. Because there's things that we will be saying tonight that may be so truthful that they will not come across with the sweetness and the medicinal touch that's always layered in some of our words. Because we're speaking truth as power, and we're speaking of things that are linked to culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality, always giving reverence, honor, glory, praise to our ancestors and the creator therein by all the names that we use. And I want like to make sure I highlight that. So I'd like to bring in Nana Kofier of the Sankofier of Jamaica. And I think it's really important. You can still hear us,
I can still hear you.
and I can hear you too. So I really
Absolutely wonderful.
So I'm grateful that we are able to have this opportunity to share some words together. There earlier what I did is I had started to read from one of your pieces from 2024, which was interesting on and just in terms of your own legacy of some of your poetic work. So referencing you as the word sound power poetess that you are. You are published author as well. You have multiple publications. You maintain work in the ancestral, spiritual, initiatory realms, and we're very grateful for what you share in that regard. You do a lot of work in Jamaica, yes, but your reach is
Hmm,
global, and we're
thank
very
you.
for that also. And then being a cultural steward and educator, like all of these different nuances of the cultural won't say folklore, won't call it myth, but the real wisdom, that one of Jamaica and how it shows itself across air, fire, earth, water, spirit for generation upon generation. And I just desired to highlight some of that. We've been having some powerful conversations, reasonings, and I just would love for you to share, some of the things that came out of recent activities in Jamaica. We had already started a little earlier, sending our prayers, our
That's right.
encouraging persons to look for those various links and sites, various embassies. It's like almost every embassy in the world is sending support to our sisters and brothers in Venezuela
That's
following,
correct.
severe earthquakes, and they're still finding many. They've been having miracles of finding even 18-day old children, babies alive with their parents. So I think that the prayers and the actionable engagement, is important. And at the same time, there have been many deaths. So we want to send those prayers, the energy of strength, and encourage those that can, and even those that have small to give small so that it can grow big, right? And we're also sending the same to our brothers and sisters that have experienced loss in Ghana as well as in the Ivory Coast with very severe flooding. The same thing of persons suffering from the after effect of flooding in Kenya amongst the Pocomo, which is something that they've been struggling with for some time. I
Yes.
mean, there's so much that's happening, and we're also sending prayers to our sisters and brothers in the Pacific Isles as there are typhoons claiming that they might hit directly places like Guam and surrounding islands. So we're just hoping that people can be protected as much as possible. So with that being part of our grounding and sharing whatever other prayers and actions to brothers and sisters that are going through hardship, have experienced sudden loss, people that are not well, we're just sending all of that humbling energy and strength so that they too can take a breath and heal. So with that, and I know you've been busy, you've been watching, you've been doing a lot. So I'd love for you to share some of that, Nana Sophia.
With your permission, may I open with an invocation?
Please.
Yes. I greet the God of the ages, the God of the now, the God of tomorrow, the God of all time, the God of the heavens, the God of the earth, the God of the fire, the water, the air, the God of the trees, the God of the shrubs, the God of the sun, the God of the moon, the God of the nighttime, the God of the day. I greet the God of the whisper. I greet the God of the shout. I greet the God of the medicine, the God of the dead, the God of the sickness, the God of the health, the God of within, the God of without, the God of divinity, and whatever else there may be. I greet God.
I'll share you well and hurt. For those in the front or the back of the room, amen. Some of us say amen, Ra. Some of us,
Yes, of course.
right? So we're just making sure that we know we're very inclusive, and thank you for sharing that
Yes,
information, because it's really,
yes,
really important. Like there were so many things that we have, usually when we reason, the idea with this particular broadcast has always been to offer just updates on things that are taking place in the region, things that are impacting our humanity, things that can help us to grow, things that can help us to heal, because there's so many brothers and sisters that get stuck. And when I say stuck, they get engaged in overlooking that everything that's around us, some of these things are distractions. So when we're speaking here on Us Speaks, Building a New Legacy, we're also speaking of things that are interdisciplinary. Speaking
that's
of things
correct.
that are transcultural, that are
Yes,
intergenerational. Uh, so many times we'll say conversation. So when you hear us say conversation, we're just saying vibrant, life centered discussion, conversation. And we like to talk about things that are happening in our home front. And right now we can speak, from where our illustrious guest, Nana Fofier, is sitting in Jamaica, right? Which, Jamaica has its own extensive history of dealing with culture, healing, arts, technology,
That's
spirituality,
correct.
and where I'm sitting for the moment in I St. Croix on the eve, literally on the eve of the emancipation of the Virgin Islands that happened on July 3rd in 1848. So there's like a whole kind of vibrational shift when we're speaking of these things. So in our podcast, we like to also talk about things that are happening where we reside in the Caribbean, in the how it's impacting Central America, South America, North America, all of that, right? And of course the world. So some of the things we're going to speak about is about bridging culture. I love how your invocation shared bridging the culture, sparking action, offering a fresh perspective on how we look at ourselves through the lens of the Creator by all the names that venerate the Creator and the Almighty. So thank you tenfold for sharing that particular portion. But I also would like for you to share. See, once they knew you were on air, then they want to be with you, right? But they were just,
I'm sorry, I was a little distracted. The phone was off. I'm not sure why it's ringing.
right, because that's what goes on around
It was
people.
a bit off. Yes.
Right. I had my ringer off and it started ringing. I think that there are a couple of things that I would like.
It's the energies. I'm beginning to accept that, that you're talking about a number of different things. And in our space, as a Jamaican people, we have been dealing with some very serious issues over the last, well, everything seems to be escalating. So over the last year, over the last few months, over the last 2, 3 years, we have seen things moving, 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 moving. I don't think we have reached yet where we're perhaps heading to, because I think we're kind of on a journey to some sort of a going and coming until you get to something like an implosion or explosion, but something is going to give. I think we all see that, we all know that, we all feel that something is going to give, because there's not an option. If we talk about the universal laws and we look at the universal laws of cause and effect, there's more than enough cause happening now, going on now. Even nature participating, the hurricanes, the floods, even nature participating from that space, even us and the actions that we are perpetrating, we must have impact. We must have an effect from all that we're doing. And there's so much we're doing that's not helpful right now, as we ourselves are on a within on a journey, but within a process of further development. The whole thing with some of the more recent technologies, we're realizing that even information that we did not have prior, did not even know existed, that so much more is being archived, so much more is being committed to some shape or form of documentation, that it can now be shared. We're connecting. We talked about information age, but after the information age, there's what you do with that information. And so this information age has led us to this bounty of information, that we are now connecting around. We're now connecting around that. We're seeing that this is happening here, that is happening there. We're seeing that, this was what happened when that was happening, and just a whole heap of what was brought forth and still being brought forth in the age of information is now coming and causing connections that must have some sort of resolution somewhere, sometime, somehow. More people are aware of the need, for example, to regard, and this is a conversation we have recently, regard the world not as just the earth, but understand there's a heavens, the earth, there's a whole cosmology that we can tap into there in terms of how we understand this world that we live in. And that when you do that, what you get is a less people centered attitude that leads to more consideration for what else is growing, walking with us, being with us, journeying with us on this earth space, and what is affecting what and whom, and all of these kinds of things. Because from that place of ignorance, where we did not know as much as we did prior, I mean, there are people who still don't know. And recently I had to be explained to somebody what a solstice is, what the solstice is, and how that affects us.
Right.
There's so many simple things that are not known. We talk even with words we're going around, and the words we're using, we're limiting their meaning to an English language that has never served us well. What do these words mean in the space and time of our ancestors, in the space of time of us, and the space of time of those who will come? Because we have to leave for them that deeper, broader, wider meaning of even words. We had a conversation recently. We were talking about gratitude. And at the end of the conversation, but I thought it was just to say thank you. And it's like, really?
Right.
How does that work? I mean, gratitude is so, I mean, this thing is, you can look at it through many different lenses. And the conversation went on to looking at gratitude through psychological, through philosophical, through spiritual lenses, and seeing how each positioned and nuanced gratitude and how that could be helpful in our lives. When we see that, for example, from a psychological place, you're talking about stress reduction, you're talking about longer life through something called gratitude. Who had thought of that before? So we're coming into the space where so much more is, we're being invited to put so much deeper meaning and real meaning, not what somebody else has told us. When I say somebody from outside of our culture has told us, but from the people within our culture, from what has been left for us, hidden from us even for a very long time. We've had some situations in Jamaica that has questioned our very humanity,
Mhm.
questioned our very humanity. Who are we as human beings? How do
Right.
we behave? We have women being attacked. We had a situation recently where there was a public outcry because a woman was literally murdered by the police. And I can't even find softer language to put that because that was just what it was.
Right.
And
Because that was
then
all over the media. Right.
yes, and then, her body was not treated well even after that.
Right.
What do you say of a people who start kind of moving in that kind of direction? Where are we going? What's our destination? Because
Mhm.
this is not about harmony. This is not about well being. This is not about community at any level at all. All of this is anti what we thought we were striving for, what we thought, out of many one people. That's anti all of that. So how do we go around saying, oh, we're Jamaicans and out of many one people, and then you start shooting women, you start murdering women? I mean, it kind of is mind-boggling. There's so much happening now that we're just in amazement. We don't know what to do. Our country recently sent back I think 28 Haitians who came in at the port, in Portland. But yet we have a contract to bring people who the United States want outside of their boundaries. These are not, we don't know that these are our neighbors or our fellow strugglers. But Haitians are. How do we turn them away and then accept other people? So there's so much happening now, and in a way I'm happy because we have to hold ourselves accountable. So,
Right.
for example, last Tuesday morning in Crossroads there was a gathering of regular Jamaican people saying we are standing up because this is not right and protesting some of these things that I just talked about. There was a recent discovery that some of the funds that came in for the hurricane, the Melissa funds, were misdirected. How do you do that?
Mhm.
What
Well,
does it mean to be human?
right.
what is the duty of care we have to each other, regardless of what position you're in. You know, when you become a prime minister or a MP, or it simply means your duty of care is more. It's a bigger duty of care that you have.
Right.
But
More,
even at the limit of just being one human being to the other, what's our duty of care?
I think that you've raised several things that I would like to go through as I'm writing them down. The the lack of humanity that you described in Jamaica. You know, we've had a thrush of, we refer to them as back and forth murders, primarily amongst our men, young boys as well. And it had a 14, 15-year old that was in broad daylight at a basketball court, had chains on in front of everyone. Someone just shot him to death, snatched the chains. So his parents, had to lay him to rest. And people knew what was happening, did not wish to speak to the police because of the way that people see the police, like you just described. But at the end of the day, even rules of engagement, if you're going to move mafia, if you're going to move mobster, gangster, if you take a life, you leave the resources for the family to at least lay them to rest properly. You don't there's rules of engagement even in chaos. Yeah. And that went from that to someone else being shot and murdered elsewhere. So we could kind of tell where that went, to it being someone else found on another island, right here in the Virgin
Yes,
Islands. And and so the community is in a very shock mode, almost to the point of being what people may think is despondent. So again, our humanity is questioned. So people are asking, why are we not, where's the march for that? Or where is the cry out for that? And it's not that people aren't crying out, but people are busy preparing to lay people to rest that they didn't prepare to
right,
have.
exactly,
So some people,
exactly.
there's just so much
One
that.
of the, mhm.
So please continue, please.
One of the things that is being spoken about even as we speak here is, the government recently declared, our government of Jamaica here, through the Ministry of Culture, recently announced that, a delegation was going to be going up to visit with the King Charles, and to engage him in a conversation on reparation. Reparation is above my pay grade. Conversations of reparation are really above my pay grade. They're way above anything that I can understand from a spiritual point of view, even. The, I,
We're gonna
I'm not
come to that.
even sure. I'm not even sure we know what we mean. What does reparation mean? I have, for a short while, it's quite a substantial part of my life, but in the grand scheme of things, of a world and a world order, for a very short time, being engaged with trying to understand ancestry and heritage, trying to understand who I am as a child of a certain set of ancestors, as a child of a general set of ancestors. We talk about African ancestors, you can probably talk about particular peoples within the African space and connect yourself with whomever resonates with your spirit, whomever your spiritual DNA attaches you with. But in the context, supposing I were to ask one of my ancestors or our ancestors what reparation would mean, if somebody did all of this to you and they wanted to come and say, as we say in Akom, me pau chow, come to say, I'm deeply, deeply regretful, I'm deeply remorseful, I'm deeply sorry. What would that look like? And I don't think it would look anything like what we're talking about today. If you come from a perspective where we all honor, there can people say God put a little bit of himself in everything he created.
Mhm.
So when you take a shipload of people and you take them across the Atlantic Ocean, and then you discover somewhere along the way that you might have erred in doing that, who and what have you offended? Do you think you've offended only the people you took across the waters? And without even going to the part we know where you've called them chattel and you've dehumanized them and called them cargo. But what about the water itself? What about that great ocean and all the spirits that dwell within?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
are we talking about when we talk about reparation? Are we talking about making it right with the spirit energy of the space we're living in, with the spirit energy of the place that our ancestors came from? Are we talking about making it right with their ancestors?
Mhm.
Are we talking about making it right with the ones who were left there, who had children torn from them,
Mhm.
who had sisters and brothers torn from them? Why is a conversation on reparation does not address this? The people who were left there who lost their family. So we're talking about the ones who have descended from, like us as descendants. But what about the ones who faced major loss of people, their family? So where are we going to talk? Where does this conversation start? Where does it end?
Well, the
Are
conversation
we
does
going
happen.
to do the appeasement rituals for that land from which the people were torn?
There are some components of that that do happen. They tend not to be as public as they should be. See what people hear when they hear reparations, and it's funny that you went because I was closing out that part on the lack of humanity and the criminality and the homicide and all of that because this is happening and people are being disappeared and
Right.
we're starting to see that there's a frequency where there's people are leaving newborns and taking them and harming them. They're leaving, they're jumping out of buildings, they're throwing other people out of
Mhm.
buildings, they're driving. So there's a frequency and energy that is definitely not pro-life, as it is not pro-human, it is not pro respect for the ancestors. It is the opposite of Ma'at. When we say Ma'at is truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance,
That's
divine
right.
and harmony, Isfet is the
Yeah,
opposite.
yeah, you come to Isfet, you come to like
Yeah,
utter chaos.
like
That
completely
we, I mean,
chaotic.
how do we even manage that if we should get there? And I suspect we are there.
So I wanted to just highlight that there are things that in our human frame, there are some persons that look at reparations and they're still in the 20th century version of reparations, where they're just looking for a check or by now trillions or Googles of dollars. And not to say that there isn't going to be a remuneration or a monetary
Exactly.
compensation part, because that's part of the system that we're still dealing with. But it could have been back in the day cowrie shells, or it could have been gold bullions or something. It could be a
Right.
different currency, but there's going to be a currency exchange. But I wanted to just highlight that the part of departure for even having some of these reparatory justice and repatriation and reparation conversations, and I would highlight and I encourage persons, if you'd like to know more about the current activities that are happening in the Caribbean and Africa in particular, as well as in the Americas, the 48 contiguous US, which spreads out on the globe, because our people, and when I'm saying our people, I'm speaking of African ancestral indigenous people. So I'm going to say that for the people in the front of the room. African ancestral indigenous
Ancestral
people,
indigenous people.
because I'm not going to just say
Right.
black, because black would make it ignore the the indigenous, native Amerindian, and we can go deeper than that. Whether we say Taino,
Right.
Eddie, Siboney, we can go
Yes.
on to that, and yeah, there's a Garifuna, there's a
Right.
lot. So I'm just saying that many people have experienced the onslaught of enslavement. Some people want to clean it up to more of an indentured servitude piece. And in some instances, the indentured servitude was not pushing people into chattel, but it created a classist system that was almost as severe as the chattel one. So again, they feel their pain, their pressure. Although when we look in the 21st century version of reparatory justice and reparations, it's very strategic, and more people have brought up these issues of the ancestral connection and not only the external reparations, but the internal reparations,
That's correct.
right?
That's
So
correct.
I wanted to highlight that, and for persons that may recall that back in the around 2011, 2012, there was an initiation of the development of reparation commissions, specifically in the Caribbean spaces. A lot of this coming out from the World Conference Against Racism that was hosted in Durban back in 2001. And then what came out of that, different, the Bridgetown uh, documents, and there was a number of things that happened in the Caribbean that pushed that envelope forward, moving into 21st century
Right.
on looking at reparations and reparatory justice very differently. Not that it is complete. I want to make sure that I highlight that. Not that it is complete at all. I just know that there's been a lot of work done in this last decade plus, and that there are brothers and sisters in other parts of the world that have equitably been doing this. And I want to highlight everything is not just English. So you have brothers and sisters in the French speaking, Dutch speaking, Spanish speaking, and Arabic speaking, and tree speaking. You have people speaking multiple languages, doing different layers of how do we heal the damage. Reparations is supposed to ultimately be how do we heal and repair the damages done from these inhumane, unjust, Isfetian institutions that attempted to dismantle, annihilate, terrorize, and commit forms of
Right.
genocide in body, mind, soul, spirit, and consciousness for people, right? The This CARICOM Reparations Commission and now the manifesto, there was a 10-point plan over a decade ago, and
That's correct.
it's been updated, and literally the updated version was presented at the Next Steps conference in Ghana the latter part of June, with leadership from CARICOM, leadership from the African Union. One second. Wow, we've had some interesting things. If I told you what just happened, there was a little spark here. When you see me move like that, it's because I said it was like fire.
Ooh.
I think maybe what I'm talking about is definitely bringing fire to the level, but I'm just highlighting that there's
Well, we do
been
need that energy of transformation. No joke about that.
true, and I think that that's
And it's
what it
funny
is.
because fire is also associated with chaos because it's red. The idea of red with fire also brings the thought of chaos. So it's interesting how that happened just now,
Just now.
in this conversation.
So I'm grateful and thank you, ancestors, for not creating anything further than what I just experienced. And if I see anything else, I'll be like, pause. But but I'm saying it from a place. Yeah, I'm saying it from a place of nurturing, cultivated love. That if we do not rephrase, it's important for us to be in a place where we can have some of these discussions and reasonings where
That's
we can
correct.
put some of, not to say that we won't get emotional, not that people won't get elevated or speak loudly or too soft or be, had, because we're just, we talk like this, we talk with our whole body. But it's just that the manner in which we reach a solution, it is so important that we all, like you said, understand the process. For some people, reparations is I'm going to get a check. For some people's reparations is I'm going to get free land and I can just sit on it. For some people, reparations is I don't understand it and it's never going to happen. So why are we doing this? For some, and I'm just saying, there's like so
That's
many, just
correct.
like you know,
Yes.
there's so many different ways that people see it. But what I can say is that there has been a significant amount of work, a number of researchers, I mean, from the academic space, from the corporate space, from the and from the political socioeconomic space, and definitely from a cultural, psychosocial, spiritual space, because people understand. Before, it was very like technical left brain. This is what happened. This is the equation for how we're going to calculate how everybody that claims that they are of African ancestry and that they are tied to people that came across during the transatlantic enslavement trade, which we are more
Right.
correctly calling human trafficking, because it wasn't just an economy. I mean, it had economic benefits, but it was trafficking, like,
That's correct.
the word that we understand, and it was inhumane, and it had used color to the point that people still, even when they say we're not racist, they're still using race and our color, our melanin, as a tool to dismantle our society, our civilization, breed impoverishment, breed criminality, all these things that we just finished talking about. That's why a melanated police officer can see a melanated woman in a vehicle, and instead of using his reasoning skills, can go from A to murdering her and then dragging her body out
Mm.
and in the back of it where everybody could see, like it don't mean anything.
Oh, no, exactly.
So I think that that's him. And then fast forward, we have persons that defend themselves. We have the young boy Anthony, who defended himself, felt threatened. Granted, the manner in which and I always say that maybe he could have stabbed the dude, could have kind of prevented him from attacking him. But I wasn't there. We don't know the fullness of what transpired. He felt he was doing self defense. Now he's serving what, life, 35 years, and he's what,
Hmm.
early 20. But then we have other people that are Eurasian, and they murder people, and they're still out in the street, or convicted felons with 30 something counts that can run countries that are the most powerful in the world.
Yes.
I'm just saying that that inequity is the reason why when we speak of reparations and reparatory justice, we're always speaking of it, at least now. And I'm saying this from a lens of sitting, researching, observing
Right. Hmm.
all of the different entities that the 10-point plan wasn't as adequate as it should have been to a lot of people. Hence, a lot of people didn't really study it. But now there's a lot of movement, a lot of
And
list
more
people.
interest.
There's more interest because people are seeing, because it's attached to the building blocks of any society and civilization. It's attached to the things that you just said, attached to the things you just said in terms of spirituality. How are we looking at what trauma happened to those royals and village those villages in the continent, that one morning they were living civilization and oneness, and the next morning
Next morning, it was
everybody was gone.
a world
And
that they didn't know how to cope with,
right,
the whole new paradigm.
right. So some of that is part of some of the social science slash research, anthropological, psychological research that a lot of persons have been exploring, and they were writing about this from like the late 1800s. It's just that many times it was in languages that those of us on this side, there was no connection. So it's when we start to go back and look at some of these archival records and narratives that we're starting to see people were writing about this in
Hmm.
the 1700s, in the 1600s, in the 1800s, but we tend not to look at those particular pieces because we tend to just look at what them say, what the
Yes,
colonizers
exactly.
said. We don't look at
Yes.
what did the common person, what was in those songs that persons were sharing, what was in those real teachings in regard to how would a father or mother feel when their children or their siblings are stripped from them,
That's
and they have
correct.
to say, granted, some people were like, well, people like to twist it to, you sold us. not recognizing nobody
You were bought.
willingly doing that kind. I mean, we have persons that we have villages, we have ethnic groups that were virtually wiped out because they wouldn't sell and they wouldn't give up their community. So anyway, I didn't want to start
And
that.
I must say, I must say the comment I made is not something, was a response to what you're saying, but I don't truly hold that view that we were bought. What amount of money could you pay to buy a human being? I mean, even the concept of buying a human being is flawed at its very core. So I said we were bought just in response to you saying you were sold.
Correct,
I do not hold that any of us were bought,
correct,
that any of us were sold. What would be the medium of exchange here? How much? I mean, what would be the value? It's just a non-conversation. It's not something I can even articulate. You can't buy a human being.
right,
I
right,
mean, really?
right.
So you think you're bad because you give some money to somebody, and no, you probably give some sort of token, but you can't buy people. You can't sell. I mean, really?
Right. And I think that's the part that some of those types of conversations have happened, but what has risen to the paper, and when I say the paper, like there's an entire manifesto now that is the CARICOM, the Caribbean community has the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, a manifesto. I want persons to hear this last part in this subtitle, a manifesto for the coming enlightenment. And the whole idea is that enlightenment, because again, this is never a manifesto is not a fixed document because there's going to be things that we might have missed collectively speaking. There's people that were not in the space that did not get to give their input. So some persons, because they didn't, they don't engage, and that's understandable. But what we're encouraging is for people to do the part in the legacy that repairs the damages done to our humanity so that we can, at least in this lifetime, do as much as we can while we can, where we can, when we can. But I want to, this is going to be very familiar for you, but I want to just share the quote that's linked right after the title page. Every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. I remember on the slave ship how they brutalized the very souls. Today they say that we are free, only to be chained in poverty. Slave driver, the table is turned. So I
Yes.
thought it was powerful that, again, these prophetic words, these lyrics that Bob Marley and the Wailers were singing from back in the day, we're talking like in the
That's right.
70s, right, from Catch a Fire, that that was pulled into this particular opening of this document from the CARICOM, well, the Caribbean Community Secretariat, right? And I think that it's important. I just want to highlight the at least how the 10-point plan, people that know what the old 10-point plan looked like, we can come to that conversation, but I want to highlight the things that were included in this.
In this new manifesto.
Yeah. So there's because there's maturity in this movement that they open with, then they go to the CARICOM 10-point plan. And I'm gonna just read them from the document. Of one, a full and formal apology. Two, an Indigenous Peoples Development Program. Three, repatriation and resettlement. Four, restitution of cultural heritage and cultural reconnection. Five, remedying the public health crisis. Six, capacity building and development through education and training. Seven, compensation for gender based violence and assault on family. Eight, psychological rehabilitation. Nine, the right to sovereignty and development, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. 10, debt cancellation, monetary compensation, and decolonization. And again, this this is just those 10, but in the body of those 10, when people look at the manifesto where there's more detail, more descriptive language and actionable deliverables, items that people can do, that's where you're going to get all of the more finite pieces of the building blocks to restore our civilization and address many of the things that you mentioned. The appendix in this manifesto focuses on a decade of progress, CARICOM, the African Union, and the global reparations movement. And then in the epilogue, it focuses on the coming enlightenment of reparations and humanity's future. So
Yeah.
again, not that it is the most comprehensive in the planet, because there's going to be areas, we're still operating through a lens of being human. So there's going to be growth and there's
Yes.
going to be development. And I found that there were two words that I felt were really important that didn't make it to this 10-point plan list, but which you've mentioned already. But in the conversation, in the reasonings that people are having, it's forcing the hand so that people can't just come up with that usual, some people sold people for other people to sell people to make money. Just like
Okay.
what you said, you can't buy a human. Even though they were doing that, that was like a whole illegitimate, unlawful, inhumane engagement. So Carmen,
Insanity. That's what it was. It was a kind of insanity. 'Cause if you think you can buy a human being, really, there has to be a kind of insanity. But there's another word that you mentioned that has been a little bit of a um, conversation for me, and I've shared it with a few people because the
oh,
word decolonization came to me very strongly. And I think I was probably sitting at the ancestral altar some years ago, probably 2 years, a year and a half. And it's like, what does that mean? And I've been struggling with that for some time. And when you think about colonization and the all that brought into our space, it's a big stretch for me to go to this idea of decolonization. I mean, really, we have gotten so enamored with some of the comforts of colonization. We have gotten so indoctrinated in some of the precepts, concepts, and all that it introduced in our space that I cannot see what decolonization would mean or would look like. I mean, are we going to go back to not using knife and fork and using our hands to eat? Actually, one of the most healthy ways to eat. They've done research on that to show that eating your hands brings you well-being much faster than eating with implements you know, like these steel metal forks kind of idea. Some work has been done on that. Are we going to, you know, I'll share this. My group, Sankofe, does an annual retreat. And this year, the annual retreat was going to be around reclaiming Africa. So reclaiming Africa, and then there was like a tagline, a blurb that went with that. And it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. It just fell apart. It didn't happen. There was no motivation. It's like I just could not, it just did not happen. Not because I planned for it not to happen, and so I had to sit with it. How does this work? This is the first time since we've been doing retreats, which is more than I don't know how many years. And it just didn't happen. I just sat around and saw it not happen. And when I started really engaging with that, which Africa can we reclaim?
mhm.
And Africa is a continent, but like in the Jamaican space, our ancestors came. A large number of them, in terms of quantity, came from places like the the west coast of Africa, definitely Central Africa. We're kind of limited there in terms of numbers of people who came. We had the Igbo people, the Akan people, Yoruba people, the Edo people, yeah. And there are others, not to be disrespectful, there are others, so all the others who came. And so if we say going to decolonize, well, let me go beyond that. If we say we're going to reclaim Africa, what are we talking about? A lot of those countries now, many of these countries now, are Christian countries. We don't need to go reclaim that. It wasn't even ours first. So what are we going to reclaim? The small, small, tiny part of these countries that still engage with their traditional systems, which is under fire. In was it Nigeria? I was reading something. I think it was in Nigeria. Or was somebody took a priest, the traditional priest somewhere, and says, "Well, do this." You know, some sort of what priests do kind of thing. And under that kind of pressure, he's telling, well, do this. You say yours, so do this. Do you carry minister of religion to the river and tell him to part the river? I mean, really? Because Jesus part the river. Do you do that? So why are you doing that to the traditional priest? So
Because
is
there's
that
a
what we're
lot,
reclaiming?
and
And
that okay,
Africa now where the traditional systems are being villainized. And
okay.
Christianity is, everybody they will kill for the Christ.
Mhm,
The same in Jamaica.
mhm.
Same in
Well,
Jamaica.
that's actually the same in a lot of places. So
That's
that's why
correct.
the focus has been because people have had wars, whether it's through Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Christian vibes. I mean, there's the list is long. Hinduism. There's just a lot because we have let, collectively speaking, religion supersede spirituality and
That's
oneness with the
correct.
Creator, right?
That's correct.
So
I
as
would,
long as yeah, there because you said some very deep points that I know could have us doing this for our next activity. So we're gonna really I would love for you to return with me so we can follow up on this. Um, on the Today is the second, so on the 16th, if you're available, of course, we can revisit that because I think that part two of the definition of these terms. Some people do not, when we say decolonize, we're usually saying undo the colonization piece for
but
simplicity. Okay, well, the how to is gonna
how
the
do
how to,
we?
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The strategies are gonna be probably as numerous as the conditions that we live in. So decolonization here in the Virgin Islands could start with us no longer being a non-incorporated, non-self-governing territory of the United States of America effective tomorrow. Since tomorrow is VI Emancipation Day, and they said from July 3rd, 1848, from this day, all unfree are free. That's kind of what they said out of their mouths. And the governor that said that at that time, a Danish West Indian um, present governor, when he said that, he was demoted and sent back to Denmark for the rest of his life because he did that. Right. I just want to highlight that. And so
Mhm.
left a whole void that from 1848 all the way through 1878, there were a host of uprisings,
That's
cold
right. Yes.
uprisings, because yes, people were no longer enslaved, but then the next day you're like, okay, so you're gonna have to pay for your food, you're gonna have to pay for where you stay, you're gonna have to pay to move about, you're gonna have to pay for this and pay for that and pay for this. So again, it was another kind of enslavement, and people was
Exactly.
villainized
Exactly.
by complexion. So I'm just saying that would be one version of decolonization. I can speak for what could happen on this side. It would be decolonization would be to stop using the colonial frame to villainize African traditional institutions and spiritual systems. That would be another way of decolonization because decolonization means that we're undoing the colonial yoke that has
Yes,
dehumanized.
but there's a way that there's a logic that is missing because is it uh, we were on a certain trajectory. So say as the people who were enslaved, there was a certain trajectory that these people were on in terms of their life, their spiritual progress, the whole journey through life. They were on this trajectory. They were on this path. All all of us going through this space of higher selves and getting into this idea of returning to a source and enlightenment and emergence and whatever we call it. And that journey got interrupted. That journey got interrupted. It got stopped at a certain point because a number of that population of people were removed. So
Hmm.
you're shifting that trajectory in some ways, and you are redefining these people in some other ways.
Hmm.
If we talk about decolonization, we can't say we're going to go back to that absolute point where that trajectory shifted.
Well, that's not what decolonization means, though. I mean, because it's not to just say we're going to repair or return to the same space where we were, because many people, we've lost so much of that. And just the
Exactly.
social construct of how we live, back then, people lived in more, in less modern environments,
Different in
right?
different environments.
So
They
I,
lived in different environments,
right.
yes.
So the point of departure is going to be slightly different, and the expectations, and maybe expectations isn't the right word, but the elements and the building blocks of how we're moving our civilization forward are going to look different than what they did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, etc. And part of what has been the cause inside of decolonization for many persons, because we can sit here and do the academic side piece, and then you got to do the spiritual piece, and then there's a political decolonization, and then remember when we're saying decolonization and people
But
start
you see,
thinking,
that's kind of colonial thinking, these all these separate compartments.
well, see, the reason that they're
And this is the
separate,
thing, how do we get our inner selves out of this frame?
the same way that we got in it.
We
We have
didn't
to unwrap.
voluntarily go into it.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But some of our people
Voluntarily go
have
there.
made it the primary mindset of how they engage. So we're
That's
looking at
right.
this as a system, and we are still using a colonial system, claiming that we're decolonizing.
Ah, now you're where I am.
Yeah, I was
That
there all
is
the
what
whole
I mean.
time. I was there the whole time. I just came to it a little. I
That
was
is
on the
what
I
I
was on,
mean.
I was on the beachfront. I was on the beachfront.
So
But
you see that is a conundrum there, yeah?
yeah, yeah, and I think that that's why, even for the purposes of those listening and tuning in and seeing this conversation, we're hoping that persons can, share your reflections, share your thoughts, and we always encourage for actionable deliverables in your thoughts and your reasonings, because we're going to pause, because I see we're at our 58th minute. And I am grateful that you were able to, even with everything that was shifting what we've done tonight, that you were able to be such an informative, blessed, gracious, I can't say guest, I'll just say that we're having a conversation. You're more like a co host, because you bring that kind of energy to what you do, Nana.
You.
Yeah, and I mean, persons, just for the record, when you hear me say spirit sister, I'm speaking of Nana Fofie, because we've known each other a while, a lot longer than usual, and we're able to have these types of discussions. So you see how we can be in different spaces of how we bring this information out. So for persons that need to know more, would like to know more about the CARICOM Reparations Commission, you can just Google CARICOM Reparations Commission, and you'll be able to get to their website. You can reach out to the CARICOM community, caricom.org, and a lot of these new pieces of information that I was sharing tonight are available. And at the same time, there are a number of organizations that you'll see listed in these respective spaces. You'll see people referencing the African Union, you'll see people
That's
referencing
right.
different reparations organizations, the Caribbean Pan African Network, the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. And let me be specific, the CARICOM Reparations Commission has representation in all of the CARICOM member nations.
States. That's correct.
Yeah, so I think as well as those that have associate membership to CARICOM. So that's why that's one of the reasons that the Virgin Islands, the U.S. side, as well as the Virgin Islands, UK side, have a lot of involvement and engagement with CARICOM because it's one of the long-standing entities that provides some, because we're too small by ourselves. So as a region, then we move closer to having a little more body in terms of being involved in these types of regional, national, regional, and international activities. So
Mhm.
any moving forward remarks for the closure you'd like to share, Spirit Sister?
I was listening to you, and I'm thinking you were saying, we're too small as one, but the strength of African people and indigenous peoples and peoples who actually live in balance, as the strength of these people have always been in the collective rather than in the individual.
Yeah, I think that's important to cite, in the collective rather than the individual. And with that, we're going to just encourage people to remember. Thank you so much, Nana Fofia. We're going to do
My
this
pleasure.
part. We'll have part next. We won't call it part two. We'll call it part
Great.
next. Yeah, so
Because I'd
don't.
love to talk in the next part about the rise in the feminine energy right now, the divine feminine principle, and how we're seeing that play out even in the murder of this woman, in this full moon where Mars just entered Venus or something like that. Talk about divine feminine, divine masculine. I'd love us to talk about some of that because we're shifting from this patriarchal space
Correct.
where we need the matriarchal energy to rise, not to knock down the patriarchal energy, but to put a balance,
Right.
to create a balance for that. So,
And with
yeah.
that, we should have had our infomercial for Pan African Women Day happening in Los Angeles on August 8th. I'm just saying, since August
Well,
9th is Pan African Women's Day. And the Pan African Women's Organization actually existed an entire year and change before the formation of the Organization of African Unity in the 1950s, that we now call that is more, has transformed into or grown into the African Union. So we're going to talk
yeah,
about those. So just
yeah,
audience, viewers, keep us on task. You heard what we said we're going to talk about in our next gathering. So again, Culture Heals Humanity Land is our foundation, and spirituality is part of our grounding always. You are a house of life. You are really, when we say parent Ankh, we're just saying house of life. And that's what we're encouraging persons to remember and reflect on in all of the systems that you follow, that always give the reverence, respect, nurturing, and cultivated love for the Creator and all of our ancestral legacies in that regard. Yes, so just keep in mind that we are here with Oz Speaks, building a new legacy. This has been your host, Queen Mother Dr. ChenziRa. I'm always honored whenever I have my spirit sister, Nana Fofie of the
indeed. It's always a pleasure to talk together.
Blessing.
Always a pleasure.
And I really just encourage persons, just alafia, blessings, woo, hotep, stay peaceful. And till the next time, stay on the rise.
You, you.
Blessings.
Blessings and salutations.